Thank you for joining us. I want to thank Senators Murray, Shaheen, and Duckworth for their relentless work on women's reproductive health care and for working so hard to fund our government. Today, Republicans will be called on to answer a very simple question. Do they support Americans' families' access to in vitro fertilization or not? Sadly, as we learned this year, access to IVF can no longer be taken for granted. From the moment the MAGA Supreme Court eliminated Roe, the hard right made clear they'd keep going. In Alabama this year, we saw just how vulnerable IVF has become as the next target of the ultra-conservatives. Since then, we've seen Republicans tie themselves in knots over support of IVF, claiming they support access to IVF, support insurance paying for IVF treatment, support American families, and yet they keep voting no. I mean, it's not hard. Look at the conservative groups like the Heritage Foundation and some of the main groups that led the charge to strike down Roe. They speak plainly and clearly to say IVF is their next target. These are groups Republicans listen to and who sets their agenda. These are the groups that want to insert government into IVF decisions and tell a woman and her doctor what she can and cannot do when it comes to IVF. And that's why today the Senate will vote again on the Right to IVF Act. It's time for Republicans to live up to their words. It's time to vote. Republicans can claim they're pro-family. Well, there's nothing more pro-family than IVF. Our bill makes IVF a basic right for all. It assures insurance companies cover IVF, making it more accessible for millions more Americans to expand their families, something their own presidential nominee, their self-proclaimed leader on fertilization, agrees. So let's give the Republican senators another chance. Apparently, some of the Republican colleagues have forgotten about this vote 3 months ago. The senator from Oklahoma recently claimed there's never been a vote taken on protecting access to IVF. That's astounding. A vital protection for families nationwide, they can't even remember it. Well, today we're going to jog their memories. It was astounding to watch them claim, of course they support families, of course they support IVF, just not enough to actually vote to protect it. So today our Republican colleagues will get a second chance, either stand with American families struggling with infertility, or stand with Project 2025 in the quest to roll back all reproductive freedom. And while working to protect American families, we're also working to avert a shutdown in less than 2 weeks. Democrats do not want a shutdown. The only way to avert a shutdown is to reach a bipartisan, bicameral agreement. However, the House is simply choosing to waste time. Tomorrow, Speaker Johnson's reportedly going to hold a vote on his 6-month CR. The only thing bipartisan about it is that both Republicans and Democrats hate that idea. I urge the House to be serious, come to the table, work together to reach a bipartisan agreement with the other leaders. We don't have time to spare. Senator Murray's been a leader on both the issues I spoke about. I'm proudly turning the podium over to her.
Yes. Thank you. And yes, we are going to have a vote on IVF. The American public is watching, and they want us to speak on this issue, and I hope our Republican colleagues have heard that message as well. It is also time for Speaker Johnson to take a good look in the mirror and ask himself, does he want to let MAGA Republicans lead him into a shutdown? Who leads the House? Is it him or is it the House Freedom Caucus? Because right now it appears he is taking orders from MAGA Republicans who don't care if we have a shutdown, and Donald Trump, who has made clear he wants a shutdown. He is proposing a bill that, first off, he can't even get through the House, and second off, he has a flat 0% chance of passing here in the Senate. And that's because his bill would leave countless programs, including our military, stuck in limbo for half a year. And it includes a massive poison pill that is the very definition of a non-starter. That's where Speaker Johnson is at. And right now, he's saying he doesn't have a backup plan, and he is saying no to a bipartisan compromise. What does he think is going to happen? If Speaker Johnson keeps following the loud voices on the furthest right The people who, again, do not give a hoot if they shut the government down and hurt families because they think it might help Donald Trump. Where does he think this is going to lead him? Because every time so far they have walked him out onto an extreme partisan limb, they sawed it off under his feet. America is tired of the constant Trump-driven chaos. My message to Speaker Johnson and to any Republicans who are serious about governing: you do not have to let a few extreme House members set the agenda. You do not have to let Donald Trump call the shots. There is an off-ramp right in front of you. One you have taken before, one you should know by now, actually works: bipartisanship. It's not rocket science, it's not unprecedented, and it's actually pretty simple. Put partisan policies, the mega wish list, put those aside, hammer out a bill with the 3 other corners of Congress that does the responsible, essential work of keeping the government open and keeping the programs families rely on up and running. Governing is not always easy, no question. But when Speaker Johnson chooses to be a mega figurehead instead of an actual leader focused on problem solving, when he chooses to listen to people who frankly are okay with who actually want a government shutdown, he is only making it harder on himself. So here's my message. I hope that the Speaker and House Republicans will end the theatrics, stop steering us to a shutdown, and work with us to chart a bipartisan course forward. Clock's ticking.
Senator Shaheen.
Well, thank you, Senator Murray. Right now, the government is set to close at the end of the month. And I think most members of Congress, both parties, Republican and Democrat, House and Senate, would acknowledge that we are living in one of the most dangerous times in our history in terms of the threats from China, from Russia, from Iran, from North Korea. And it would be a disaster, not just for our ability to run the country, but for the message that it would send across the globe if we would shut down the government. That's a gimme to our adversaries. I sit on both the Armed Services and Foreign Relations committees. I know that our adversaries are watching. They're watching what we're doing. China and Russia are looking for any opportunity to undermine our preparedness. Running out the clock from funding our government is an open goal of our adversaries. Inaction signals to our adversaries that the U.S. is not fully committed to our priorities. And if the government shuts down training, personnel movements, other activities within our military that are critical to national preparedness are going to be the first on the chopping block. What message does it send to the rest of the world if we can't come together to keep our nation strong and ready by doing the simple act of passing a budget? And if the government shuts down, it's going to be hardworking, everyday Americans who suffer the most. We could have more than 2 million federal employees, more than 80% of whom are outside of Washington, D.C. So if you think you don't like people who work in Washington, most federal employees do not work in Washington. They are air traffic controllers, food safety inspectors, park rangers, people who are keeping Americans safe. So as the political gamesmanship and petty bickering continues, it would be our veterans, our service members, our families across the country who would be hurt. Americans are counting on us to roll up our sleeves to do the hard work of finding consensus. So it's time to act responsibly to get a clean CR over the finish line. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen, member of the Appropriations Committee, and now Senator Duckworth, who's the sponsor of our IVF bill.
Thank you, Leader Schumer. In a few minutes, we're going to have this vote yet again to create a statutory right for Americans to access reproductive technologies. This is a chance for my colleagues across the aisle to put their vote where their mouths have been. They say they support IVF. Here you go. Vote on this. It's very simple. This bill simply says that if you want to access assistive reproductive technology, including IVF, you will have a right to do so. If you are a healthcare provider that wants to offer this technology, you have a right to do so. And if you are an insurance company that wants to cover it, you have the right to cover it. It also has a provision which I think is incredibly important, which is allowing our military men and women access to IVF. And in particular, it allows our military men and women prior to a deployment into a combat zone to preserve and freeze their genetic material so that should they come home with injuries that result in them becoming infertile, they will have already preserved the genetic material so that they can themselves start those beautiful families that they wanted after protecting our families for the rest of us. I think it is simple. I think that Donald Trump has the ability right now to let my Republican colleagues know it's time to vote to support this bill. After all, with a single tweet, he was able to kill the border security bill. He can send out a tweet right now and get all my Republican colleagues to vote for this. And for all of my Republican colleagues who claim to support IVF, here you go, vote on this. It is very simple. Americans want access to reproductive technologies. They should have the right to access it. And frankly, I don't want a convicted felon who has been accused of inappropriate behavior with women to be the guy to decide what to do with my life and to do with my body. Look, I went to war to defend this nation's rights and freedoms, and I did it because I deeply believe in the importance of the mission of defending America's rights and freedoms. I'm not asking Republicans to head into combat. All I'm saying is just vote on this. Simply support this bill that represents millions of women's only chance at starting families. Because no matter what you say about your support for IVF, unless you vote for this bill, you are going to allow all of the state by state by state by state pieces of legislation that block the ability to access IVF simply by defining a fertilized egg as a human being, which then prevents IVF from being carried out to continue to affect women's ability to start families. So my Republican colleagues, let's go to the floor. Let's vote.
Thank you, Tammy, and for your amazing work on this issue. Yes, yes, woman in the black dress.
If the House CR fails tonight on the State Baptist Act, what is your timeline for moving on the Senate version of the CR? And
Look, the way to get this done is bipartisan, bicameral. We've told that to Speaker Johnson, as we told it to Speaker McCarthy before, and we hope after this vote he will sit down and negotiate a bipartisan, bicameral bill. Yes, Manu.
Former President Trump's allies have blamed Democratic rhetoric for leading to these repeated assassination attempts and calling him a threat to democracy. So given that, will you stop calling him a threat to democracy?
The bottom line is that our Democratic Senate has drawn very clearly the differences between the Republican Party, Donald Trump, and what we believe in. We're going to continue to do that. Yes.
Senator Schumer, do you believe the Secret Service should get more funding in this round of budget negotiations, and will it be enough to solve the problems that they currently have in the middle of this very important?
Look, if the Secret Service believes they need more money, I would be very open to giving them that more money in this bill or the next bill, however quickly we can work it out and get bipartisan agreement. No other women. Okay.
Are you satisfied with the level of coverage the Secret Service is giving?
Well, we're getting, we'll be briefed by the Secret Service in detail very shortly. Yes.
And so just to follow up a little bit, and this might be a question for Chair Murray, has the Secret Service asked for more money for short-term coverage, like it's the election season, so that they can have more resources to be able to cover these campaign events?
So we've been in close touch with the Secret Service about what their needs are. We do have an anomaly from OMB regarding fast-forwarding some of their funding for the CR, which is the critical issue that we need to do. Hopefully, as soon as Speaker Johnson decides he's ready to go.
Okay. Yes, Sahil.
Donald Trump just posted a few moments ago that if he's elected president, he would get salt back to the civil reduction. I know that's a priority of yours. What's your response?
I've always been for eliminating the cap on salt. I think it was a nasty piece of legislation supported by Donald Trump, aimed at the blue states, which help the people of their states in many ways. Thank you, everybody.